Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. Today I'm going to talk about why Thanos always wins. No matter what is going to happen in the Captain Marvel movie or in the Avengers Endgame movie, Thanos always wins. Now, if you listen to my channel, you know that I'm a bit of a writer and I like to do mental exercises with my writing and think about things. And I started to think about time travel, and then I applied it to what is happening in the Marvel universe, and I thought to myself, wait a second, Thanos always wins. And so I'm going to go through this little mental exercise with you to show you why that happens. And the way that I look at things is I apply the rules of logic to them. And basically the rules of logic say that if you have a necessary principle and you have a necessary event, and those two things, when you put them together, produce a necessary outcome, then it doesn't matter what the accidents are to that outcome, it will always happen that way. And in story terms, that means the following. It doesn't matter what your characters do. They can come up with any combination of actions to try to solve the problem. It doesn't matter. It could be a near infinite number of combinations of what they could do. If the necessary principle applies and the necessary event occurs, the necessary outcome will always happen. And that's what I started looking at with this problem with Marvel right now in the MCU. Because I take one necessary principle, which is how their universe exists, and one necessary event, which has to occur because it's already occurred in Avengers Infinity War, and I put those two things together, and the logical outcome is that Thanos always wins. So first of all, let's look at the storyline itself. Because we know that Thanos has snapped half of the population away from all of existence. We also know that from the trailers for the new Spider-Man movie that comes out later this year, that Peter Parker, who was one of those people snapped away, he's back. And they talk about the Avengers as if nothing has happened. So we know that somewhere within the Captain Marvel movie and the Avengers Endgame movie, the snap is going to be reversed. And we also know from Avengers Infinity War how it's going to be reversed. It's going to be reversed through time travel. Because Doctor Strange already used the Time Stone to go forward in time to figure out a way in order to change what was going to happen with Thanos' snap. It's already happened in Avengers Infinity War. He used time travel in order to get the ball rolling in the series of events that will eventually lead to the snap not actually occurring. All right, so we already know that the snap occurs, it's going to be undone. It's going to be undone by something that happens within time travel, because time travel has already been used, in Doctor Strange's words, to begin the end game. Now, let's look at time travel itself for a second. Now, time travel works in different ways depending on what system you are applying it to. Because there's two kinds of systems. There is a multiverse system and there is a universe system. Because the opposite of multi is uni, so we live in a universe. We live in the universe, right? The universe means that there is one. That's it. There's nothing else. There's no alternate timelines. There's no alternate versions of the Earth. There's the universe. That's it. One. And I'm going to look at the universe model first, just to lay the groundwork for the multiverse one, which we'll look at in much more depth. So, in a universe, if you have an event that happens, which is your event A, which is Thanos' snap. It happens at point A, which leads to point B, where your hero X or heroes X, we'll call them the Avengers, decide at point B to go back in time before point A, which is Thanos' snap, and so they will stop point A from actually occurring. In a universe, what occurs is a time paradox. Because if the Avengers go back from point B before point A and stop point A from happening, but point B only happens because point A happened, then they will never go back in time, and therefore that will never occur. So what would happen most probably in a universe when this time paradox elapses? That is to say, when point C comes along, which is the very instant after point B, then the universe would probably just snap right back to its original state. That is to say that it would look like it had, as if they had never gone back in time. So, for all practical purposes, time travel simply wouldn't work in a universe. Because even if they did manage to go back in time and stop point A from happening, it would cause the paradox, which would then cause the universe to revert back to its normal state at point C, which means that they would get in their time machine, and when they would press the button to try to go back in time, it would simply look like nothing happened. So, for all intents and purposes, time travel doesn't exist within this model. But Marvel isn't a universe. It is a multiverse. They have multiple versions of the same Earth. They have multiple timelines. So it is a multiverse. All right? And in a multiverse, time travel works differently. Because you have point A, which is Thanos' snap. It leads to point B, where the Avengers decide to go back in time before point A and stop point A from happening. A paradox doesn't ensue within a multiverse. What happens is, the moment the Avengers arrive in that point before point A new timeline is created. So your original timeline, where everything happened, is your timeline alpha. Okay? Timeline alpha is where Thanos' snap happens at point A, and then that leads up to point B, where your Avengers go back in time before point A. But when they arrive in that moment before point A, they simply create an offshoot of the timeline, which will be timeline beta. But here's the thing. Timeline alpha does not cease to exist. Even when timeline beta is created, and they stop Thanos from snapping, and they live out their lives hunky-dory in timeline beta, timeline alpha still exists. Which means that in timeline alpha, Thanos' snap still occurred. Nothing changes. Everyone is still dead. And on top of that, after point B, where the Avengers go back in time, the Avengers have simply abandoned timeline alpha to go live in timeline beta. Now, someone might say, well, I don't care, because it's not about timelines to me. It's about the hero's journey. I just want to see these heroes do this. I don't care about timeline alpha, where everybody is still dead. I'm just there to see the hero's journey, and we follow the hero's journey, and that's all I care about. But here's the thing. Are they still heroes? That's a good question. I would say they're not. Because let's look at it not in terms of timelines. Let's look at it in terms of countries. Okay, you have country alpha and country beta. So you have Hero X. He lives in country alpha. And in country alpha, there was a war at point A. And now Hero X lives in country alpha, and he has come to this point B. This point B where he has to make a decision. He lives in this country where a lot of his countrymen have died, a lot of his friends have died, a lot of his family has died. But at point B, he can decide, I can either stay and live in country alpha, I can deal with my losses, and I can continue to try to build off of those losses something new in country alpha, or I can decide to abandon my country alpha and go live in country beta, where everything is hunky-dory. That is to say, I will abandon country alpha, which means I will abandon all of my countrymen, which means I will abandon all of my friends, which means I will abandon all of my family, and go live in country beta. Because in country beta, everything's just fine, and I can have new countrymen, I can get new friends, I can marry a new wife, have new children, and have a new family. So, if Hero X stays in his own country, alpha, and does what he needs to do in order to get over the tragedy, he is a hero. But if he moves to country beta, he's not a hero anymore. He's a coward. Pure and simple. He's a coward. So when the Avengers go from point B and abandon timeline alpha to go live in timeline beta, they have abandoned everyone there. They have abandoned all of their friends. They have abandoned all of their families to go live in timeline beta, which is where everything is fine now. So, are they still heroes? I would say no. But someone might say, well, these people that are in the story, they don't know the difference between these timelines. So since they don't know, yes, they may still be doing that, but since they don't know, they're still heroes? I would argue no. Because let's look at the number of people who would know that this is what would occur in the multiverse with the use of time travel. Number one would be Doctor Strange. He was in possession of the time gem. He has read multiple ancient texts on this gem and how it works, and he knows very well, with his fiddling with dimensions, how the multiverse works. And he has set all of this into motion. Doctor Strange would know. Let's look at Thor. Thor is an Asgardian. The Asgardians have superior technology, superior magic. They possess the Tesseract for a long time. They like to fiddle with dimensions. The Asgardians would know. And Thor, although he looks like a meathead, he's an Asgardian meathead. And as a child, he would have learned how the multiverse works. Thor would know. Let's look at Tony Stark. Tony Stark is a super genius. He is working with Dr. Banner, who is a super genius. He is working off of the material he has from his father, who was a super genius, who possessed the Tesseract and did some experiments on it for a while. So Tony Stark would most probably know that this is the way the multiverse works. Let's look at S.H.I.E.L.D. You have the top minds on the planet working for S.H.I.E.L.D. You have multiple scientists working on these very dense problems. They too were in possession of the Tesseract for some time and have the research concerning its properties to bend reality. S.H.I.E.L.D. would most probably know that this is how the multiverse works. Now, I would agree that a lot of the heroes like Captain America, Black Widow, Hawkeye, they would have no clue. But that doesn't make things better. That makes things worse. Because, in effect, one or more of the people, starting with Doctor Strange, would know how the multiverse works. He has convinced all the rest of his teammates in Avengers, if they don't already know how the multiverse works, which, again, Tony Stark and a few others, like Thor, would probably know, he has convinced all of the other ones who don't know to abandon their timeline, to abandon their friends, to abandon their families, and go cower in timeline beta with him. Because he just can't deal with what is actually happening in timeline alpha. Now, whoever this person is, whether it be Doctor Strange or Thor or Tony Stark, if they do that, full well knowing what happens within the multiverse and time travel, and they convince their friends who know no better to do this, they're not heroes. They're not even cowards anymore. They're villains. That's the act of a villain. And in effect, what has happened in Timeline Alpha is that Thanos, in his machinations to bring all of this about, has actually turned one or more of the heroes into a villain who will then take all of the rest of the heroes from that timeline and put them into a different timeline where they won't disturb him anymore. And further from that, we know that from Avengers Infinity Gauntlet that Doctor Strange went into multiple futures to see what could be done to stop Thanos' snap from happening. And in only one was he able to see how they were going to be able to stop him. So we know that since there were multiple upon multiple versions of the universe that he went into the future to see, and only in one of them was there a way out in order to build the timeline beta, we know that in the majority of the multiverse, in the majority of the different versions of the multiverse where Thanos has come up with his plan, there is no way of stopping him, and there is no way of reversing what he has done, which means Thanos wins. And we also know that since there's only one, and I'll bump it up to 1%, not just one, but 1% chance, and when you're dealing with a near infinite number of dimensions and timelines in the multiverse, that's a big bump up from 1 to 1%. So in 1% of the time, he knows within these multiple tries at trying to build a timeline beta, only 1% of the time will it actually work. Which means that the timeline beta, or the 1% of timeline betas, which are in the multiverse, are only 1% of the entire multiverse. 99% of the entire multiverse where Thanos has come up with this plan, it can never be changed. Now, the story tries to confuse you and make you think that it is a universe instead of a multiverse by talking about how he has destroyed half of the entire population of the universe. And they try to get you to think of it in terms of a universe. But it's not a universe. It's a multiverse. And that is the one principle that I'm talking about. Marvel is a multiverse. That is a principle that cannot change for the existence of Marvel. Therefore, that is an effect. The second necessary event that I was talking about, that necessarily has to happen because it already has happened in the Marvel Infinity War movie, is that Doctor Strange went into multiple futures with the Time Stone and couldn't see any way out except for this 1% of the time. Which means that in 99% of the multiverse where Thanos had this plan, there is no way of stopping Thanos' snap from actually happening. So only in the 1% of beta timelines can Thanos be stopped. So if you look at how it actually is as a multiverse instead of a universe, then 99% of the time, Thanos does wipe out half of the entire population. Now, that beta timeline that gets created decreases his percentage from 50% down to slightly less than 50% of the entire population gets wiped out in the entire multiverse, but it just decreases it very slightly from 50%. So, in 99% of the multiverse, Thanos wins. And besides that, he has turned one of these heroes into a villain so that that person takes all of the rest of the Avengers who should avenge the multiverse by killing Thanos, and that hero who becomes a villain takes all of those Avengers and shoves them all into the 1% pocket timeline of Timeline Beta, where they will never disturb Thanos again in their timelines because they've abandoned their timelines, where they will never avenge anything because they're gone from their timelines, and where if Thanos plans to do the same thing in the future, either by the same means or a different means, no one is there to stop him. Which means Thanos always wins. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about all this. Alright, I'll see you later. Bye.